All right, hello and welcome back to the Gumtree of Liberty podcast. I'm your host, LibertyDownUnder, and with today I've got Centrist, who is right now at the protests in Perth, live streaming straight from there. So we thought today we'd talk a bit about the protests that are going on right now that are nationwide. So how does it look on the ground down there, Centrist?
Hey mate, how you going? Yeah, we've got a pretty big crowd. It's for Perth, it's not too bad. I'll give you a bit of a pan around. We're sitting in the middle of Forest Place, which is like a central courtyard outside the train station and the main shopping mall. We just had a welcome to country ceremony, which is really cool. They got a lot of cheers. And yeah, they've got the main guy talking now. So if you want, I'll flip you around and you can have a look at what's going on and we'll go from there.
Sure.
One, two, three, freedom! We're not here just about some little movement or anything like that. We're here about freedom of speech, freedom of listen, freedom of our right as it's right in ladies and gentlemen.
What I might do is I might see if I can get down a bit further out because we've also got the balcony up top. Sort of see what's happening.
Well, it looks pretty busy, which is good.
It's not too bad, yeah. Yeah, we've got a lot of we've got a big push with the FIFO workers this time around because the mandates of the FIFO came out not long ago. So there's a lot of disgruntled FIFO workers who are not impressed after having worked the whole pandemic with all the restrictions and everything in place and still able to go and work. And they suffered some of the hardest conditions because some of them weren't even allowed to fly home to their home states and things like that. And now they're being told they won't have a job if they don't get this jab. So there's a lot of guys who've done all the hard yards and now really, really pissed off.
So would that be like all the mining fly in, fly out workers, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, all the FIFO workers, yep. You can see the high vis in the crowd.
Don't worry, they've gone to Kmart and ordered that in advance for paid LNP employees.
Yeah, fake FIFOs, that's what they are. Isn't that what they go? But yeah, so I'll just keep walking around a bit and give you a bit more of a feel of what's going on. Oh yeah, I can get a good look from one end. Hopefully don't steal this guy's camera position. I'm hoping you can get a decent enough look at the crowd there.
Yeah, that's pretty decent.
So, yeah, a lot of different people, all different crowds, different nationalities. It's a pretty diverse crew, which is good.
Could be at least a few thousand there.
Yeah, maybe a couple. It's a bit hard to tell, but we'll hopefully, as I said, like I'm going for a bit of a walk. What I might do is I might go down as well and walk into the crowd a little bit for us, give you a bit of a feel of what it's like down there. Oh, I'm only using my phone. I don't know how Rushkin does it with that big camera.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine. Yeah.
Did you get any news back from the Queensland mob?
So I know they're protesting. They had a good turnout down there. Apparently, they had the riot police have been out in force in Melbourne. So in Melbourne, you've got the riot police out in Melbourne apparently, and then in Brisbane, you've got counter protesters.
Yeah, well, apparently the police helped organise this one.
People have come out in force to protest against people protesting against lockdowns. Which
I've heard that.
The counter protesters are protesting, saying we need to have all the mandates, which includes following social distancing rules. So you've got protesters out there in public complaining about people protesting in public. So I don't get that logic.
That kind of gives you a good view of what's going on.
So who's speaking right now?
I'm not too sure, to be honest. We've had a couple of speakers. I'm not aware of who's actually leading the speech. There's a lady talking now who's an epidemiologist. Some interesting signs in that. We got the hold the line signs.
Yeah, there's big Eureka cross flying right there.
Yeah, we've got an anaesthetist, just technician, 20 years, and she's 2 weeks left of her job. I personally have to deal with this too because my wife's in the dental industry, so she's facing the sack as well.
Well, I know one of the guys his wife has been a nurse for about 10 years, something like that, and she's lost her job. There's a
fair bit of that going on.
Yeah. If you don't comply, you lose your job.
Yeah, basically. Which isn't then choice, is it? We've got a Gadsden flag down here. Yeah. Take it over, we'll have a look. Sorry, guys.
So when I introduced me, and then of course we'll join in on the chorus. Before I go into the song, I just want to read out the song numbers.
Yeah, so it's not small. It seems to have grown a bit from the last one.
You've been there for what? How long? 10 minutes is when it started.
I've been here since half an hour before. There was some small numbers growing, and then we've ended up with quite a big crowd, which is good.
As we continue in our ways with the categorized physical and the pen. If you want to shop in
yeah, a lot of the red flags.
So we also say, it's not selfish to want freedom of choice. Against coercion now, we must use our voice. So choose a word. So have a think, choose a word, and be kind. An open heart. Because it's something wonderful here. A land of opportunity and being so open heart.
Are there any police out on the ground with you?
Yeah, we got a few crew here. Apparently they helped organise it, so they seem pretty sure. We don't have so I think keep in mind is we don't have the stay-at-home orders like Melbourne and Sydney. So for us, it's not technically, well, it's not against health orders. So it's all pretty calm, and the cops seem pretty cool. They seem pretty chill. So they were pretty good the last one I was at too. They actually helping everyone out and stuff. So definitely not what the media keep telling everyone it is. Like I said, I've seen a lot of people from different age groups, different races, different everything. It's a whole big mix of people down here, which has been great. We've got the hippies, which is awesome. Can I film this? Can I film this? Is that okay? Alright guys, yeah, I'll just show you the stand here. It's pretty cool. This is where the smoking ceremony was.
Yeah, all walks of life there.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's good to see. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of elderly as well.
Real unity from all Australians.
It is. Hey boys. Here you go. Yeah, it was interesting. We didn't end up hearing much more about it, but there was a story going around that I don't know if anyone's ever able to actually clarify it, that the military were going into the outback and bringing the jab, apparently. And there was a couple of, I remember seeing a lady's video go viral who was a bit upset about the whole thing, was a bit worried about the coercion. And so, yeah, it's not just impacting people who are working in the cities and stuff, it's also regional communities who may not have access to all the information that everyone seems to be getting at the moment.
Are you talking about like mobile medical centres, that sort of stuff? Is that
there was
going out there?
There was well, it's not unheard of. The military have done it before, but it was just something that this time they seemed concerned about with that video that went viral. But until that, I haven't heard much else. So It'll be interesting to see if anyone follows up on that story. The crowds are getting bigger as well. It's good, more people are showing up now.
So is it mostly a Perth crowd, or do you have people coming in from outside
I met an old Italian couple that's from York, and they were up here because they were a bit worried about what was going on. Apparently, York in the country has had a couple of protests as well, but I hadn't heard anything about it. So it's interesting. Like, I was surprising this. Oops, sorry, I hope I haven't done anything wrong there. Here we go. That's better. Yeah, so it's interesting. There's also, as I said, all sorts of walks of life here, which is good. But the crowd, as I said, the crowd's getting big. A lot of the FIFO boys are out. So, oh, excuse me, fellas, can I sneak through? Sorry.
Well, York's what, 100 kilometres or so east of Perth. So it does show
York, it's a really small country town, and he was saying originally when we were first talking to him, he was saying that the York crowd actually is bigger than the current crowd that we had, but obviously the crowd's grown since then. So look at that. So I'll get back up to the top. Have you got many watching?
I've got a couple watching. Yeah, it definitely seems to be bigger than it was when we started 10 minutes ago. It seems like
it is definitely growing, which is awesome. I think you get a lot of bystanders coming through to have a look as well, which is nice to see. Let's get back up the top. Yeah, you can see the crowd's obviously increased all the way out to here now. Before there was a bit of a gap in there.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, for those who aren't in Perth or Western Australia, roughly where is this protest being held right now?
So we're right in the city, in the middle of, so it's a place called Forest Place that's right next to the main central train station. It's also right in the city centre where all the shops and everything are. So we're just walking past like some of the retail shops and that now. So for those in the other countries, we've been pretty lucky because we haven't had the lockdowns like some of the other countries have had. So for us, it's not like a lot of our shops have been open most of the time. So not a lot of them have been closing down. And I think the councils have been doing deals to keep them up again. So
well, obviously, you guys mostly just had strong. You guys obviously had just a strong border as opposed to stay-at-home orders. So
we're also the most isolated capital city in the world. So for us, it was our border was easy to lock down and easy to be able to shut down. Which I think you'll find that nearly everybody who was at this protest probably agreed with it at the start. We've got a big remote community where there's a lot of Aboriginal remote communities who are probably more more at risk of the virus originally at the start, at least. So we were all pretty keen to shut everything down pretty early just to make sure that no one was sort of hurt. But I think everyone here's sort of had enough of it and think everything's gone too fast. So. Yeah, guys. All right, now bear with me. I'll just try and put the camera around and have a chat with you and see what we can do.
Sure.
Is that it? Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So you can see the crowds, and as I said, it's still getting bigger. There's more and more people coming in, FIFO workers and stuff. You see a lot of high-vis coming in now. Looks like we might have some fireys here as well, which is pretty cool. So yeah, it's a lot bigger than we thought, which is good.
because I know that there was some suspicion that we wouldn't have much in the way of protests this time. Like we had the protests, meant to be the protest at the end of the tradie protest that week down there. There wasn't much on Thursday, Friday. So I heard people saying that they'll think that this is going to be like that one in the sense that, you wouldn't have many people turn up, even though you had a lot of promotion of it. But it looks like it's a good turnout there.
Yeah. We thought that there was going to have similar things like what was happening in Queensland with some counter protests, which I think that actually might be why the cops are here, because as I said, at the moment it's legal to be here, so the cops are just here to obviously make sure everyone keeps calm and keeps happy. But as I said, you can see at the front where we talked to the ladies at the front, there was everyone's pretty chill. They're just worried, I guess. So yeah, we got a few crowds of them, so you can see a couple more over there, a couple in there.
So people are still coming in all the time. You're still increasing in size.
Yeah. The number's still getting bigger and bigger. Sorry about the camera work if it's not too flash. I'm not much of a cameraman.
That's all good.
But yeah. So what about So what else has been happening? What's happened in you heard about the South Australia one? I heard there was a bit of a crowd going down there as well.
Yeah, I do have a photo from South Australia. Let me try and find it. But yeah, apparently there has been a decent crowd down there as well, from what I've heard from people.
That's good. FIFO guy's just walked past and he's got 17 years on his jumper. So I might see if we can, I can get someone to talk to, if we can, and see what happens. But I don't know. I don't have all the right camera gear with me. I've just got my phone. So I'll see if I can do that once everything's sort of settled down a bit.
I'm just going to quickly. I'll share that photo quickly. So that's from Adelaide, about half an hour ago, I think it was. So you do have a decent turnout there as well. It seems to be a different protest setup to what you have in Western Australia, but so a lot more people are out of the streets with signs as opposed to having a proper stage setup.
Yeah, this is it's actually quite a bit different to the last one that I was at as well. We had last one they did a walk from Kings Park through to a section across the road. So the cops had set up like walkways for everyone so that they could walk through peacefully and make sure everyone was safe crossing the road and stuff. But I think this is probably a better way to do it, to be honest, because it groups everyone together and everyone can then see what and hear what they're talking about. Because last time where it was held, there wasn't a lot of passing traffic. So it's interesting. But I think it's a much better place to probably set up for this sort of thing.
Well, being held near the shops and the train station means you're going to have a lot more people coming past and seeing a peaceful movement. Yeah,
I think that's going to be a key. Like I said, I'm really stoked that we've got so many different people down here, which is good. So hopefully we don't see any of this media bullshit with the calling everyone far right stuff, because if you come down here, you can see it's nothing like that. You might have one or two people who probably get too into the political stuff and that, but basically it's just hard workers and stuff who seem to be really worried about having their jobs and livelihoods taken away from them.
Well, we even saw that Aboriginal stand before with the smoking ceremony. I don't think you're going to call them far right at all.
Yeah, you would hope not. But we'll see how it happens. Like I said, and I don't know if you saw the flags. We've got nearly every single flag flying up the top at the moment, from the Aboriginal flag through to the normal Union. And then we've also got the red ensign, and we've got the Eureka stockade.
And Eureka, and Gadsden, you said as well.
We saw the guy wearing the Gadsden as a flag, yeah. So there's no rainbow Gadsdens yet, which maybe I'll have to get one of them and bring them down. So
no pride flags or anything?
No, I haven't seen one. But that's, I don't know, the topic's not really about those sort of rights. So maybe they thought it wouldn't help. But as I said, I'd still do a rainbow Gadsden any day. That's really, yes. I really like that one. So yeah, it seems to be a bit here. Have we got any? So we got people from all around the world.
Supposedly, I do have a few. We do have a few. I think we've got a few Americans and Aussies at least.
Oh, good work.
For the international audience. Twitter has been a bit quiet today about the protest, I presume, because it hasn't gotten really violent. I know Sydney's protest today was, I think, I think they were talking about doing prayer meditation in a few spots around
Oh,
Sydney.
cool.
So
Yeah, good idea.
We haven't. It's been a lot more non-violent than in the past. So obviously, you're not seeing all the videos coming out of police lines being broken by protesters and pepper spraying and sort of stuff. Which means there is less attention being given to it on Twitter and online. But it does, when the media covers it, they can't exactly call them far right extremists and violent protesters, because it hasn't been violent from what I've seen.
Yeah. No. Well, that's good. That's what we want to see. The Melbourne stuff, their police force is a bit over the top. That's half the problem. So I'll just sort of take you out. I saw this one. Don't know if you can see that. But...
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
It looks good. I even heard a story that apparently the police staked out a park in, I think it was either Melbourne or Sydney, and it cost them like $50,000 to stake it out, and they didn't find any protesters that were meant to be there.
Yeah,
they're expecting violent protesters to be at this park, and no one turned up. So I don't know if that's true or not, but I did hear that as a story from the protests from today.
I did see a video. I saw Rukshan went live about an hour and a half ago, I think it was, and I saw him walking through those parks where there was heaps of cops, and they were in there eating their lunch in the in the van. So they got their lunchrooms, but the tradies don't. So that was quite funny.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they're the police. They're exempt from all this.
Yeah, they always are, right? You see, like I said there, the crowd's getting bigger now. We got all the people on the chairs standing up because they can't see. It's got tradies, elderly, all sorts of people here. He won't remember this. That's right. Just a minute, guys. Just trying to sneak back up the front again. I'll see if you can have a listen to what's going on.
Sure, that'd be great.
Hey, Tom.
Jab 1. Jab 2.
Jeb. Boo's there for the passport mandates.
Yeah.
Yeah, look like it's getting denser as well, which is awesome.
And then jab 3 as UK, and jab 4 as in Israel, and then how many other jabs moving around our own country and internationally. Does that sound like freedom?
Oh, we had a Marga. There's always a few of them around.
Always. So we've got a question in the chat for you. They're asking who's speaking at the protest right now. If you know who the speaker is.
No, I don't know who it is at the moment. I'll try and get a bit closer. I believe it might be the lady from before that was the epidemiologist.
Yeah.
That'll get a cheer. There you go. Having a dig at the mainstream media.
Yes. That's always popular at these protests.
The government has the media to incite and divide us from our family and friends with terms such as vaccinated and unvaccinated people. We now have a toxic, discriminatory society where family and friends have been divided due to the false information being provided by Mark McGowan's government and by the worst Australians. Sorry, West Australians. And this government
Oh, I've just seen a Make Australia Great Again hat, which is funny.
Clive Palmer?
Oh no, don't.
No, he's
no, is he? Oh, he's not a well-favoured person over in the West.
No.
Even amongst the people who probably vote that way. Sorry, mate.
He's not well liked in Queensland or Western Australia.
Yeah, we know it.
He's behind the Australian migrant or Make Australia Great Again. So
yeah, I know he can't even come up with something new. Obviously, people don't forget it's all families who are going to be affected. You know, it's not a choice. You've been told either you take this jab or you lose your job, basically, which is, like I said, the FIFO guys particularly have done it really hard at the start. I personally know a FIFO worker who was originally from Melbourne, and he was told that there was no way he would be able to go home on his off shift and then come back. Like, he wouldn't be guaranteed a job when he got back because he wouldn't be allowed back into the country, into the state. It's pretty much a country over here. But yeah, so he did, I think it was 7 or 8 months away from his family before his wife ended up being able to get a ticket over and get in to see him. So, yeah. So there's a lot more. It's been, as I said, it's a bit of a knock to the guys who've done all the hard work. So the FIFO boys are particularly pissed off.
Yeah, a lot of nurses who are anti-mandate complaining, saying that, you know, they were praised last year for it, for, working through the pandemic, and now they're, being let go. 75 FIFO workers with the tradies in Melbourne, they've put all this hard work, keeping the economy going as best they can. And now
especially the mining guys.
Yes. Yeah. It's very important. The mining industry is very important in Western Australia, from what I've heard.
Yeah, it's probably our biggest industry.
Probably
tourism would be number 2. The mining's the mining's one of our biggest ones for sure. Sorry, I was just trying to catch what she was saying.
No one loses their job from the experimental vaccine.
So I think was she saying that no one should lose their job over the vaccine? Is that what she was saying?
Yeah.
I think I picked that up.
Yeah.
Remember, we are not called unvaccinated people. We are the healthy people.
That was a big cheer. What did she say?
She was saying that we're not the unhealthy people, we're the healthy people.
Because vaccines were not needed to control it.
Well, the study that you were talking about a few days ago, where they basically said it was a Jerusalem study from the Jerusalem Post. The Israelis 2 doses of Pfizer and the antibodies go down.
Yeah. So the new study out of Israel, particularly, because they've been predominantly, I think it's nearly 100% Pfizer over there. The most recent study found that they were having waning issues amongst. I won't say the number, but it was in the thousands of people that they had as part of the trial, and they found that I think after 6 months it was starting to wane. So it's not. They seem to be getting the really good efficacy at the very start. Side effects aside, but they don't seem to be lasting full length, which is another reason why a lot of people are into the mandate.
Hence the booster shot.
Hence the booster shot. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be a great? No. Let's give them all. Get the mainstream people. Invite them up to ask questions, right?
They're trying to ask the mainstream media to come up and talk on the stage to see if they can answer some questions.
So do we have like 9 and 7 in ABC there, or?
I zoomed in on someone before. They're pointing them out now, though. I know I wanted to boo them because then they're not going to get on stage.
Yeah.
So we've got one of the big camera mobs down here. As you can tell which one he is, it's because he's the one who's dressed in this really nice suit. Everyone else is sort of in high vis and all that sort of stuff.
Everyone, go on down.
Yeah, that's the shouting. I don't know if you can hear that. They're shouting, come on down.
To the mainstream media?
I believe that's who they're referring to. Yeah, I'll go back around the back and see how much people it's got again. But on this side is definitely packed out. We've got a few political parties down here, a couple of the minors. I don't know if there's any of the major parties down here coming to listen to anyone though. So,
I'm gonna guess you've got Lib Dems there, definitely.
I haven't seen them. I've been trying to get in contact to see if there's someone we can talk to on the ground to see what the West Australian Lib Dems are talking about. But yeah, so far I haven't heard back, and now I've gone live, so I'm not sure.
Well, if you want to leave it all and go set that up, I can kick you from the stream. You can go talk to them, and then I'll bring you back later on if you need to.
Oh, it's all right, man. I was waiting for a message from someone, but I don't think he's going to get back to me anyway. It takes a few days to get back, so. You can see it sort of spread out a bit further towards the back again now. Got more crew rocking up as well. Might go back up top, see if I can get a decent photo from the side. Thanks, mate. Yeah. Obviously, he doesn't like the CCTV.
Yes.
Alright, I'm going to go up the escalator, see if we can get a cool shot now.
Yeah, sure.
Heading down, going over to our lovely city.
I'll make sure I get you on camera, right?
So, for those who do go on the march, if you've got a real...
Oh, so they are going for a march, is what they're just announcing now. So.
So they've had going for a march. Yeah, I can see that.
I believe so, yeah. I'm not entirely sure, but we'll see if we can check back in.
Our diggers fought and died for our freedom.
They were just referencing our military veterans, the diggers. So
yeah,
that got an uproar because they were fighting. The reference that they fought for our freedoms, and so it's their turn to fight. See if I can get that over. Let me know if this camera shot's no good. I'm just going to try and get a decent one from up top.
Yeah, sure. It looks a bit bigger. It looks a bit bigger from compared to what you had before. A bit more packed.
Yeah. They're singing a bit of an Aussie anthem right now.
What's the Matilda? I had that there.
Yeah.
Matilda.
One of the political parties that are down here. Thank you.
Yeah. I haven't heard of them before. Australian one.
Yeah, I've heard of him. I've seen one of the guys who does it. He does like I think he has a YouTube channel. But I don't know. I don't listen to a lot of them. but it's a bit hard. There's a few. I think the difference, I think, for the Americans especially are watching, we have a lot of independent parties, and some of them are like state-based, so you might not even see them on a federal level. So unlike the Republicans and the Democrats are our Liberal and Labor parties. Australia, Aussie Liberty Network, look it up. So we're so the Democrats and Republicans are like our Liberals and Labor parties. But we've also, like I said, like that part, Australia One would only be in a certain number of states. I know that you guys in Queensland have got some Queensland-based groups. There's not as many of them.
Bobcat is the big one. He operates mainly in Queensland.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different. So it also gives us a bit more of a better representation because our country's so spread out. It's hard. I think it's hard for people to understand. Like our total population is probably the same as that of Florida, which and you can fit 55 Floridas inside of Australia. So I sort of might give you an idea of how we've got some densely packed cities, but there's a fair chunk of people who are living out the sticks, so to say.
It seems like the crowd's packing in a bit up the top there as well.
Originally it was like one line long, and now we've got nearly 4 deep, which is cool.
Probably people who are coming, they go to the shops and then they go and see what's happening. I'm guessing,
yeah, well, we're right outside of one of the big things that Mark Myers here. So it's a pretty common walkway because this section tees up to the train station. So you walk across Forest Chase to get in there. Boys in blue. Thanks, fellas. Yeah, just again, the WA cops so far from all the protests that we've seen have been really, really good. A totally different feel to what you see when you watch the Melbourne protests. So it's just a complete different vibe. Like no one's worried or anything like that. So. A couple of them are push bike riders in their shorts, which is always funny to see.
People who've been riding cars and joined in, right?
Yeah, no, the cops.
Okay.
You guys, I don't know if you get them on the East Coast, where you got like cyclist cops running around in their shorts. It's quite funny. It doesn't look really. I think that looks a lot different to the Melbourne cops.
Yes.
Can I get you guys on there? Cool, thanks, fellas.
Love it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ones here. Thank you. Oh, be brave. No jab, no way. Stay well. All right, thank you.
I like that. No jab, no way. Which I guess is a bit like the no jab, no pay. So I like that.
Yeah, no. Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely densed up a little bit too. You can see that the numbers are sort of closed in together.
Yeah, all closing ranks packing in.
Yeah.
Any more word on that march?
Not yet. I'm not really sure. We'll wait and see. If you want, I can tune out for a bit and go catch up with the people I'm here with and see what they're doing. And then we can just try and see what else I can offer you. So I don't want to go all the way in because obviously I don't have a proper camera set up. So
yeah, no. Well, if you want to go to that, I'll walk through what we've seen from other places in Australia right now, and if we've got time, I'll also look a bit at the recent Melbourne vote on the Senate.
All right, cool. Tune back in. Hang on, sorry, on the wrong camera again. Hang on. Edit there. Yeah, cool. So I can just sign back into this. Yeah, you gonna stay live on the thread?
Yeah, I'll be live. I'll be live for like at least half an hour more, I reckon.
Cool. All right, I'll check back in a little bit. All right, thanks, guys. Cool. Yeah.
All right, so that was centrist. He's right down in Perth right now in Western Australia, down on the southwest coast, dealing with the protests that we have down there. So they've kicked off probably 45 minutes ago. So that most protests were starting at midday local time. So that's the last protest to start. So we started off first down in Melbourne and Canberra and Sydney a few hours ago, probably about 3-4 hours ago. They kicked off first, followed by Queensland and Adelaide, and I think Darwin possibly even, and then you've got Western Australia, and they've kicked off. And I think there was also protests down in Hobart at some point. We don't have a heap out on Twitter, as I was saying before. The protests haven't been as violent from what I've seen this time, so there's a lot less footage out there for people to watch about the protests. But yeah, we have seen, as I said before, we do also have that counter protester movement, at least in Brisbane. I haven't heard of anything from counter protesters down in Sydney and Melbourne. I don't think we're going to see much of a counter protest movement there, just because you have stay at home orders. But definitely up in Brisbane, where you don't have any lockdowns to that extent, people can obviously come out and protest freely without it being illegal, which is what centrists were saying before. It's not illegal to protest in Perth because they haven't had the stay-at-home orders, whereas it's legal to protest in Sydney and Melbourne. So you have a lot of members of the left, and even probably I'm guessing a few from the right, but definitely from the left, coming out against the protesters and complaining about them protesting, because there's obviously that big push right now to open up or get to a position where we have COVID zero, so we can open up. There's the policy right now in Queensland, at least, which has just come out. I shared it before on Twitter, I think, and definitely on Instagram. I'll try and pull up the picture again. But basically, the stance right now that they've taken is that we're not going to open up Queensland, or at least not until it's safe to do so, which has been the stance for a couple of weeks now. But what's really worrying right now is we've got the government of Queensland saying that what they're going to do is, while there's any risk of being infected, we're not going to open up. So there's pressure right now from Scott Morrison to open up the borders internationally for Australia. Right now, he's looking at New South Wales, is looking at opening up internationally soon. They've got, I think, over 70% vaccinated. Once they hit 80%, they're going to look at opening up. Perrottet, the premier down there, wants to open up to international tourism as well, or at least some sort of international travel for non-Australians. But Scott Morrison has decided to override him. And said, no, we will be opening up internationally, but that's just to get Australian residents and citizens and let them travel in and out of Australia. But the problem there is, of course, that, Scott Morrison's finally, overriding state premiers, although he said the last 18, 20 months, he has not, overridden Dan Andrews or Gladys Berejiklian when she was premier, or Palaszczuk in Queensland, or Mark McGowan in Western Australia. They have not been overridden much by the Prime Minister. Only now, when people want to open up more, is Scott Morrison saying, no, I'm going to override what your state policy is, and so we're going to operate differently, because quarantining, at least, is a federal power. Section 51 of the Constitution basically says that quarantining is done by the federal government. It can be done by states, but because it's a Section 51 issue, state, if it's inconsistency, if the state and federal law is inconsistent, federal law overrides it. So you cancel a state law on those topics, but if there's federal law and that federal law is inconsistent with state law, federal law takes priority. So I broke it down a bit a while ago, I think about a month ago, and we had CD, Ray, and Jerry and I were talking about the legal side of things. So there is federal and state authority to talk about quarantines. Quarantine Act is what we used to have federally. It's now the Biosecurity Act. And right now, what they've passed is an amendment to the Biosecurity Act, whereas anyone who comes into Australia by sea or by air, they can basically put a quarantine order on anyone that comes from any plane or boat, and basically say that anyone that comes from any passenger of that plane or boat, they have to quarantine for 14 days. So quarantining is more of a federal issue, whereas I think vaccine mandates are more of a state thing. Of course, you also got quarantine camps which are being built. So I think you got two in Queensland. Obviously, the one I've spoken about before, the Wellcamp one near Toowoomba is state authority, whereas the one in Brisbane is federal. So obviously, if there's an inconsistency between state and federal laws, The state-run camp, which is near me, they'd have to comply with federal laws. But right now, Scott Morrison has been pretty weak on cracking down on rogue states. I guess it's basically 8 countries right now, because every state and territory is doing things differently, and there's no real federal leadership until right now, where we have Scott Morrison cracking down on Perrottet, which is, at least he's, on one hand, he's finally got the guts to crack down, but on the other hand, this is too little too late. Plus, it's works against freedom. He's doing the crackdown to oppose, people wanting to open up and get back to normal, which has always been the big push. We return to normal. So I've got that picture there right now from the which came out from the Queensland government. And you see, that's it there. So all of us will be infected. Queensland to panic over reopening. Queensland's chief health officer has issued a grim warning to residents, claiming everyone will end up infected with COVID when the state reopens its borders. So the lady on the left there is Palaszczuk. She's the premier, and on the right is our chief health officer of Queensland. Every state has their own chief health officer. So probably the one that most people would know is you've got Kerry Chant is the one right now for Kerry Chant is the chief health officer of New South Wales. She's been in the media a lot because she's been doing the daily press conferences. Whereas in Queensland, you've got Dr. Jeanette Young, who's our health officer, and they've both been issuing mandates and guidance orders throughout the entire duration of COVID, dealing with restrictions and mandates and whatnot. So a lot of the authority for that comes from state governments opposed to the federal government. The federal government does have a chief health officer, but that guy doesn't deal as much with vaccine mandates. His area is going to be more quarantine side of things. So that's where we stand right now with regards to looking at reopening. You've still got Western Australia is still saying they're not going to reopen internationally until 90% vaccinated. I think Tasmania, which is Liberal, is looking at a similar target, and then Queensland, of course, is when it's safe to reopen. And Western Australia again might follow the same route as Queensland and go when it's safe, because they, as I was saying before to Centrist, his state government, because he's in Western Australia, has had probably the toughest border laws of any Australian state or territory during COVID. Really having that hard border crackdown. It's been that way for a lot of COVID. So if they reopen internationally anytime soon, that'll be a surprise, because they have not shown a tendency to reopen in the past. So Queensland, Western Australia, which are both Labor states, aren't going to reopen anytime soon. Victoria possibly will, but we don't know. So right now they're looking at reopening, even as their cases skyrocket. They've got over 2,000 cases per day right now. They had that a couple of days ago. So they're looking at reopening right now with massive case numbers, which is, if it's all for safety, then I don't see why they're reopening with such high numbers. Like, at least if they're going to, say we'll lock down for people's safety, they should at least, have consistency there and really, actually lock down for safety and reopen when it is safe to reopen. By that I mean, when we have 0 cases, because obviously the 3 Labor states have been pushing for COVID 0. The idea of that is that we want to get rid of COVID and then open up when we have no COVID. And whenever COVID comes back, we're going to crack back down. That came from Dr. Kerry Chan from New South Wales. In fact, she was saying, we're going to have COVID forever, so we're always going to have snap lockdowns and mask mandates. So obviously, the 3 Labor states obviously agree with that judgment, which is why they're pushing for COVID 0. So we're an island nation, so we can't get it. We can't, we're not going to have people coming into Australia by land through a land border. So it does make it a bit easier, because it's regulating international travel only, which is why you do have the Biosecurity Act being amended to allow for human security orders or human health orders to put in place those quarantines for anyone coming into internationally. So that's the idea they're going for right now is, we'll have these tyrannical laws because it's for your safety. We're going to keep COVID away forever. But that, of course, means you've got the threat of mask mandates and vaccine mandates and quarantines. They're going to be there for a very long time. So what we're hearing, that's why we have 3 quarantine camps. So the one in Melbourne was the one that was built first. It's going to reopen, I think, around Christmas, New Year. So if they're saying the vaccine, will fix everything, and they're going to hit 80-90% by the end of this year, then why have these COVID camps? They're going to be for the government by building these camps is implicitly admitting that we're going to have COVID for a very long time, and we're going to have snap lockdowns for a very long time, which is quite worrying for those of us who are seeing this government tyranny growing and growing every day. A lot of Australians are often quite worried because we wake up, see the news, and we don't know what's going to be, if it's going to be better or worse for us. Of course, as I said before, I did a tweet recently on Twitter talking about, we had a vote recently then in Melbourne, and that's basically meant that politicians can't be in Parliament if they don't have the vaccine. So I'll walk through that briefly for you. So the bill basically means that MPs, members of Parliament, would have to present proof of the vaccine and medical information, and give that to the Victorian government in order to be able to sit in Parliament and vote. Now the problem with that is that you're not allowed to vote by distance in Victoria. There's some legal issues there, and you're not going to be able to amend the laws to make that possible, because both major parties are opposed to distance voting, because the minor parties and independents are more likely to be in more regional areas. Now, if they put in place a lockdown, it's going to be harder for those politicians to get to Melbourne to vote than it will be for MPs that are in the area of Melbourne, which are Labor and Liberal, which means that then if Parliament has to vote on anything in an emergency, it's going to be Labor and Liberal that are voting in Parliament, and not the minor parties. So obviously it's going to be a lot easier for them to pass more tyrannical laws, I guess. So the vote passed the lower house, I think, last week. So basically what that meant is that it would apply to all members of the lower house. It was almost unanimous. You had all of Labor, which controls the lower house, plus all of the Liberal Party, minus one. Neil Angus was the one member of the Liberal Party to vote against it. And then in the upper house, they voted on Thursday our time. And what that meant is that it applies to them as well. So both houses voted to pass it. In the upper house in Victoria, you've got, I think, 18 Labor senators of the 40 seats there are. So Labor did not have a majority in the upper house. So what they need is because one of those senators that they have in the upper house is the Speaker, and the Speaker can only vote in a tie. So that gives them 17. So if they get 3, that gives them 20. And then, of course, they can then split the tie with the Speaker, so they could pass the laws that way. So that's what they've been doing to pass these lockdown laws. Is they work with the crossbench, because neither them nor the Liberals have a majority. So that the crossbench is called. It's basically people who are independents or minor parties, and they have what's called the balance of power. So often in the Senate, you'll have the balance of power being held by the crossbench, because neither party has a majority. Because we have preference voting and we have a lot of senators, it means it's a lot easier to get minor parties in the Senate than it does in the lower house, because you'll have a region that'll have federally, each state has, say, 12 senators. So it's a lot easier to get minor parties in federally, because we have preference voting. So minor parties are going to get preferences from that. Plus, they're going to get people who vote them number one on the ballot. So you're going to have minor parties get in that way. And it's the same at state level as well. Although I don't know too much about how that works at the state level, because Queensland, my state, doesn't have an upper house. We've only got a lower house. But in Victoria, so they voted, there's 40 MPs, 17 or 18 are Labor. They ended up having 31 state senators vote for the vaccine mandate. So basically, that was all of Labor plus the Liberals minus one. One Liberal voted against it. 5 members of Parliament abstained. And then you had 4 who voted against the mandate. So 31 for it, 4 against it. The 4 against it were 2 Liberal Democrats, which is like Libertarian, 1 independent, and 1 member of the Liberal Party. So as a result of that, those 4 who aren't giving over their information. So even though at least the 2 Lib Dems they have the vaccine, but they're refusing to hand over their information because it's a matter of privacy, and they're standing up for all Victorians. That's their stance. We're going to stand up for all Australians and all Victorians, because all Victorians have the right to privacy, so they're refusing to comply. If all 4 refuse to comply, then that means that at the start of next year, the state government in Victoria can pass permanent emergency powers, which they're already considering. So they're originally going to pass it with the crossbench. So they would have the support of 3 crossbenchers, and they'd pass it that way. But because they need 3 to get the majority. If these 4 can't vote, then it means you've got 36 MPs, and so therefore Labor can pass the bill in their own right, which basically means that Labor, who now controls both houses, can do it to pass any laws they want and can pass permanent emergency powers on their own, which is very, very worrying because we don't know what that's going to entail. So what they've been doing right now is they've been renewing it as they go. But right now, because they've lost those 4 senators who would vote against it, it means Labor can do whatever they want. They've got complete control of both levels of Parliament, which is really worrying. I know a lot of Victorians that I know are trying to get out right now because they're quite concerned that, they're not going to be able to have any freedoms left at all once these permanent emergency powers pass, because it will give the government a lot more authority that they don't have right now. And we have centrists back. Hello, how's it going? How's it going out there?
Hey mate, how are you? Sorry, emergency's just happened here. Someone's collapsed. Sorry, I'll just get out of the way. I won't go in there. That's just rude. Actually, I'd actually lined up Brent, who was one of the drummers here, for the little stand that I'd shown you earlier, but he's out there offering assistance at the moment, so I can't really grab him. But yeah, I believe the walk is going to happen soon. We're gonna head. The aim is to head up and then down one of the arcade or one of the terraces here, and then I'm not sure where they're planning to head, so I missed that bit. But you see, I'll just turn it around so you can see what's happening.
Sure.
You see, they're all heading off now to head up for this walk.
So, do they know why why this person collapsed?
No, literally, like it happened the moment you connected live. I was standing pretty much right next to him, so I just got out of there. There's no point in me being anywhere near that. That's just going to cause problems for everyone. So I might be able to grab Brent, but if he's keen now to have a chat, do you want to ask the questions, mate? It's probably going to be easier because of my setup.
Yeah, I'll ask a few questions.
Yeah.
Sure. If you can grab them, that'd be great.
Yes, I can chat with these guys. So the people we're going to speak to hopefully is one of the members from the Tribe Freedom Sovereignty group here that's got a little stand set up. So it'll be good to get their perspective of what's going on in terms of like the mandates and all that sort of stuff. Just waiting for him to finish speaking. I'll see if I can grab him.
Yeah, all good, all good.
Hopefully before the walk takes off too far.
I guess while we wait, and does anyone in the chat have any questions for centrists out there Brent, right now on the ground?
Brent, can I grab you, mate? Is that all right? Yeah. Oh, yeah, you put this in your ear, if you don't mind.
Okay.
I've only got one thing there. So we've got Brent here.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
In Queensland. Liberty Network.
So I'm Liberty Down Under. I'm from Queensland. We're part of the Aussie Liberty Network. So we're talking about right now about how bad the protests are. So we're live streaming right now on YouTube, if that's fine. I've got a few questions for you.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to ask you, what's your story? Like, why are you involved in the anti-lockdown movement, the anti-mandate movement?
I'm getting involved just the simple freedoms of what we need to be sitting in sovereignty. To have any body to tell you what you can and cannot do is really nice. It's not the proper way of life.
Yes.
That's a fundamental thing. Fundamentally, it's my body, my choice. And the fact that I want to spread information about that there are many alternatives to many different things to solve problems in life. And I've just spent 30 years designing cities. I study plant building, energy efficient systems, alternative technologies in both the medical, like I said, energy for power and sustainable buildings. Also, I'm learning a bit more about the spirituality side of things and trying to implement that and how that affects and impacts us in this world today, because it's all sort of multidimensional. It's all connected in one way or another through many thousands and billions of octaves of frequency. We're all beings with vibration, and just to promote that kind of how vibration affects the world either in a negative or positive manner, and really understand those patterns so we can implement a better world in every aspect. In food, like I said, building, energy, housing, every form. I've spent 30 years to try and just solve problems and And this is just one of those platforms so I can promote and just share some of my ideas through many methods to get rid of viruses, you know, like some of the simple ones are like Dr. Bob Beck's protocol. He was curing full-blown AIDS victims and cancer victims in the early 80s and 90s with this simple biphasic voltages pulsed in the body, and colloidal silver and ozonated water. And, you know, they've been around for 100 years, so I just want to try and bring that back again. And just promote those older systems that used to work, that still do work, but have been just blanketed by, you know, big money, big pharma. So we've just got to really try and take our power back in all those platforms, and that's through knowledge is the fundamental thing. So just really spreading the truth about how physics works, about how spirituality works, and about how many of other aspects can work, and things that we've tried in the past. So, yeah.
So more of a holistic sort of approach to healthcare and spirituality.
Definitely, yes. Holistically, quantumly, spiritually, yeah, all those forms.
Yeah. So have you been affected at all by the mandates and the government lockdowns? Has that affected you at all? In I'm guessing you're from Perth.
Yes, yeah, Perth. Yeah, it has.
Yes.
Affected me in, many different ways. Being a sensitive person, I'm very empathic. Like when it comes to the territory, with being an Aboriginal, we're considered the most psychic culture in the world. So we're very, very sensitive to very finite energy systems. And when there's a mass group in depression or in trauma, that really affects those who are sensitive. And we really take that on as if it's our own. And we can get very confused, and we have to work through very many different modalities to try and maintain the being of self, just that foundation of who I really am and not being affected by the other energies. So it was affecting me on that subtle, very subtle, empathic and sympathetic systems that the body undergoes. So I fall into depression through, you know, just feeling how people are. And I'll try and transmute that depression into something positive. So I will learn, or I'll pray, I'll push out the energy, I'll find ideas, I'll send out love, prayers, and just trying to counteract anything that we perceive as negative or that's feeling really disgusting in me. So it's really a great tool for me to feel this, because it's opened me up into more systems about my inner knowing, my inner body, my inner cosmos, my inner universe, and the abilities of what cells can do, how we radiate electricity out of the body. You know, when they did the tests, when they had something like 400 meditators in a city, and they wanted to reduce the crime rate. So they had 100 years worth of statistics. So there's a good pattern there. And they just spent an hour meditating on just focusing on reducing the crime rate. And guess what? The percentages dropped. So this is another platform. So we're all collectively resonating at one frequency of what we want. And that really, you know, if we can transmit it out of our heart, which is 5,000 times more powerful than the brain, the electromagnetic fields that radiate from the brain, it actually changes the atomic structures of atoms, the molecular structures, those components, those thought patterns, all those thought currents. And by us doing this collectively together worldwide, unifying that energy, it really can, it may not be seen overnight, but it can really change it. And I love the physics behind that. So it really, it really helps me to know more about us and myself. And we have ability in the finer structures, the finer energy systems. We used to consider as Zubudu or black magic, but we can really do something from the heart. And that's what I like to really fundamentally promote, that your heart can really affect atomic and the vibratory worlds around us of the unseen forces. You know, so yeah.
So I'm guessing that you're familiar with all the mental impact of the lockdowns then, and how that's led to, you know, more depression. Obviously, you've got I think there's been a spike in suicide attempts and self-harm because of all the mental pressures of the lockdowns.
Yeah,
I think they were saying it was 148 children and teenagers per day being admitted to hospitals in Melbourne because of suicide reports and self-harm. Because there has been that real effect on people's mental health and spiritual health and all that sort of stuff. There's been that real, I guess it's often, you know, overlooked. People will focus on economic impact, but less so on, you know, the impact on people's self and, you know, and how they perceive themselves.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Those finer energies are really taking over, and in a way that I try and see beyond duality, and it can be a beneficial thing for the soul's growth. We come here for an experience, and some of these things are catalysts to help us to really find our full potential and really show compassion and empathetic and sympathetic qualities to man. As soon as I'll go back to the tsunami, the big one that killed more than 300,000. That event, those deaths, really accelerated the compassion of mankind for the world. And this COVID system is kind of doing the same thing. It's a catalyst for man to reunite. And some spiritualists or some religious groups will kind of conform to this. What I'm saying now is that it is a big necessary thing for man. And Mother Nature, she's feeling it. She's part of it. Collectively, something big like this, because our hearts and our minds are feeling something's wrong with the planet. It's going on too long. Our freedoms are taken. Our choice, all the knowledge is kept secret about many things that can help us promote to live more healthy, more abundantly. And when you push that consciousness to the edge, we want survival, and this is the counter effects. And the counter effects are information that comes out from the darkness. More compassion, more sympathetic and empathetic qualities of mankind, and we learn to have kind of a united brotherhood together now. And these are the positive effects to it. So it's kind of a necessity in a way to evolve mankind. I see it that way. Some won't agree, but I can see both positive and negative effects to all of this. And I'm just trying to look at it in both fields. So yeah.
See, you mean a bit like building resilience and perseverance and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Test of the man's spirit and growth.
Yeah, I guess the last question I have for you is how can people in the rest of the world, whether they be East Coast or overseas, how can they help the movement in Perth for freedom? How can we help you guys?
Just by sending the consciousness to us, sending the knowingness and sending their love to us. Just imagine holding this system or holding a person or a concept and holding it like a baby, like a newborn baby that you just received. There's an automatic natural love that goes. So for me, I would just say the most simplest thing you can do is sending love. You may want to grab these leaders who really destroy mankind and the world, and you really just want to end them from existence. But I just say, look, instead of snapping their necks in your mind, grab them like a baby and just nurture them. That's what we need a bit fundamentally. Now, for those who have financial abundance, and yes, promote into better technology, sustainable technology, the hydrogen economy. A lot of Tesla's work. We need to promote people, scientists, into developing these systems, because there are many healing modalities using very specific frequencies that can cure cancers, that can cure mental illness. And as we know, money, sickness is a big business. There's trillions and trillions of dollars worth of industry. So we're really fighting these men who want the power and control, they want the monopoly. So we need to promote more of the technology. We need to promote more information. It needs to come out into the light, the hidden information, the secret information. We need to promote more of what resonance is. I'll go back to Tesla's quote. He says, to understand the universe, think in terms of vibration. So we need scientists who can understand spectral analysis a lot better, and how the physical, the mental, and the spiritual body interconnect through these octave sequences. So we really need to understand that, promote that, so we have a better understanding of science. Because at the moment, these mainstream scientists are skin deep of how things work, of how our old Ayurvedics, our Buddhists used to understand the quantum world in much more detail than we did now. So we need to bring a bit of the old information and bring it into the forward, mesh it, unite it, and evolve it. So we just need a collective of information. And the fundamental, somebody's got the financial money to promote in these systems, and those who can't really do much but just go back to love their own heart. And that you may not know it, but it does really change it slowly. But by just sitting in your own love, learning to love yourself, then you can really love the others. So that's what I would say to do. Just love, fundamentally love.
All right. Well, thank you and good luck.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Good talking to you.
Peace be with you.
Take care. Thank you. Peace be with you, brother. See you.
See you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
Welcome, brother.
All right, guys, that was amazing. But an awesome insight into the diversity that is on these protests. I think it gets really easy for the mainstream media to label everyone all sorts of things, which isn't nice. And as you can see, the diversity around what's happening down here, it's not as simple as what they like to portray it as. But the crowd are just moving off to the walk now. Just trying to check it. I might see if I can get over to the march. Whoop, sorry. Hopefully I haven't lost you there.
No.
Yeah. So Brent was one of the drummers. I put a video up. You can see a couple of the boys go at it. They're amazing, very talented men. So it was good listening to them drum out a few beats for what was going on. So I'm just trying to catch up. Hang on.
I've found that video. I'll link that video in the description.
What I'll do is I might try before I leave. I might try and grab some details off the guys and see if we can get them on again later if you like, and just so that we can show the unity what Aussie Liberty Network's supposed to be all about. Get these guys done. We'll get them on and we'll see if we can get them, give them some promotion for what they're trying to achieve, which would be nice. We're getting around the world even. So. Oh, yeah, I'm just trying to turn the camera around, guys. Excuse the mug. Oh.
You turned it off.
No, yeah, I figured it out. It's all right.
Technology.
Oh, mate, I'm doing it all. Is that better?
Yeah, that's great.
Cool. Oh, I should mention there's another group that we saw down here as well, which was, I actually saw it while we were off air. Some One Nation supporters down here. Some of the political members. So as you can see, like there's a lot more to what is happening than like I said, like what the mainstream media like to portray this movement as.
So everyone from people affected by the economic side of things, your FIFO workers, people who are interested in the politics side of things, which I guess is One Nation, and people who are there for your spirituality and mental health.
It's a big.
Good to see that big variety there, and it really shows you that this is not all far right extremists and neo-Nazis.
No, it's ridiculous. It's all of it. Yeah. Sorry, go.
Ordinary run-of-the-mill Australians who are just living their lives as wanting to try and live their lives as they used to.
Yeah, exactly right, mate. It's good to see there's a big mix. We got the cops blocking it off for us, allowing us to look. Sorry, buddy. Would you like to be on camera? There's always someone that's a miserable fuck. So, but they blocked it off and then allowing the march to take place, which is pretty cool. As I said, got to give credit where it's due. I know a lot of libertarians aren't big fans of the cops, but they're making this possible as well, which is good. Check this guy out. Just a wave. So obviously people can have a laugh too, which is awesome. Got a few different camera crews down here, which is great.
So what you mean from the local newspapers and radios and
TV
stations?
I saw one group which is called Freedom Media. So obviously they're like a small group that are obviously kitted up and able to do that sort of recording. So I saw them down here getting footage and stuff. We've got Australia One supporters there, obviously. As I said, we've got the Margaret crew, all different types of people who are down here. There's a good sign over there. But yeah, so I might just keep walking and I'll tune back in with you in a little bit.
Sure. So no sign of police violence or
none of it. They're organising it. They're helping make it happen. So big difference to what you're seeing in Melbourne, which is amazing. So cool. All right, mate. I might try and check in a bit later.
Cool, easy.
All right, see you, mate.
All right. So I guess the question right now is: does anyone have any questions? I guess about the situation over in Australia right now. Any questions that you guys? I know we've got a few Americans who are watching. Any questions that you guys might have about what you're seeing through your media, because I know often what say the Americans and the Brits are seeing about Australia and COVID is often not actually what's not actually happening over here, because it goes through our media and then it goes through your media, so it goes through that second filter. Because obviously, as we were saying, the protests aren't violent. Like, well, at least these ones aren't violent. They keep talking about. They keep saying all these far right extremists, all these all these protesters, the neo Nazis. When we had the tradie protesters, when we had those tradie protests, I guess they were calling them, those protesters, they were saying they're basically paid actors by the Liberal Party. And I guess this really goes to show you that it's not really paid actors at all. It's your run of the mill Australians. I guess the story last time we heard was they went out. So we had the protests that were Monday. When we had the tradie protests, we did a live stream to cover those ones. Myself, Jack, and Victorian, we did a live stream on that one Monday night, and you had reasonable sized protests, and you had a massive protest on Tuesday. And the story was that these are fake protesters. They were paid members of the Liberal Party who had gone that night, ordered high-vis uniforms online, and had them delivered to their house in preparation for the march on Tuesday. And I guess the story there is they're all fake. They're not real tradies because their uniforms are nice and clean. So apparently you're not a real. So apparently real workers are obviously you get in be messy and dirty. Apparently real tradesmen can't be clean, and also the fact that apparently it's going to be possible logistically to have thousands and thousands of people buy high vis all in one night for the next day. It's not realistic. Having to pay that many people buy high vis, and then all of them have high vis ready to go the next day to protest and be organised. So I guess we've got a couple of questions in the chat. I guess one of them right now is, how many protests are going on across the country right now? So you've got, from memory, we have Brisbane, Sydney, Canberra, Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne, and I think so. That's six of the 8 capitals. I don't know if we have protests in Hobart, which is Northern Territory. Hobart is Tasmania, and then in Darwin, which is Northern Territory. I can check those now for you, though. I haven't heard anything about protests there, but I know there have been people tweeting the last few days organising protests, and I guess I've got a mate down at the Brisbane protest today. Jerry's down there right now at that protest with a bunch of Queensland Twitter users who are wanting to stand up for freedom. So people from all over Australia, I guess, so you're coming together in unity to fight to get our freedoms back. I'll just try and find the protests signs for you guys. But yeah, from what I know, the protests down in Sydney today were definitely more peaceful than they have been in the past. The last time we had Saturday protests, you had the police out in force. Like I think 800 to 1,000 police were out in force, so you didn't really have many protesters being out there at all because of the police presence. That's what I've got the protest signs up, the protest posters up now. So I'll just share those for you. So that's your first one. So that's the Brisbane protest. So you obviously food, drinks, music, face paintings. Obviously, it started as sort of more of a meeting, like the Perth one did, and then it's transitioned from there into being a march, I'm guessing, from what I've heard. So that's the Brisbane protest. Then you've got protests. The next protest we have is protests in Sydney. So there you go, Sydney United in Prayer, Silence and Meditation on the 16th of October at 12 p.m. So there's 3 locations there because it's probably a bigger city. So you've got 3 different locations of protests all across the city in case people can't get to the one. In case people can't get to one, there's other ones they can go to. So you've got 3 protests there for silence and meditation, which is really not violent at all. Sitting in silence and praying is not really what I'd call violent. And I want to see how the media spins that when they come out and do their media reports tonight on the news. And then of course you've got your Melbourne protests. So they did their things a bit differently because it's more illegal down there than say in Brisbane. Because they've had a lot of the violent protests. Obviously, a lot of the videos that people have seen overseas of the violence has come directly from Melbourne. You've had the riot cops used there. I think they had the riot cops were there this morning, from what I heard. You had the riot cops out preparing for this protest. So they did theirs a bit differently. So they've got multiple locations, and what they did there is that they went out like on Telegram. So there's a link to their Telegram group that they were in, and then through there, that's how they got the locations out to be specific. So they obviously, you can see there's Fitzroy North, Carlton North, etc. That's the general meeting areas. But then they hadn't actually revealed where the actual protests were going to be. So it meant that if the police wanted to stop them, the police had to go to to get to the meeting areas as opposed to the actual location. And then of course, that splits the police up because you've got eight different locations the police had to watch, or nine different locations for the police to watch. And of course, as I said before, there was also that one park as well where the police were staking that out, and there was never ended up being any protests coming out from there. So every city's doing things a bit differently. You've got prayer, you've got the Telegram stuff being organised. You've got you've got proper meetings in Perth and Brisbane that then turned into marches. Say, here's the Perth one, Forest Place, which is where Centrist is at right now. So it does, it walks through, what they're opposed to. They're opposed to the police state, lockdowns, curfews, masks, QR codes, surveillance, privacy invasion, job loss coercion, medical coercion, or division. So that job loss coercion is what that I said before. Well, we had Centrist on, and the first time that he appeared, we had that shirt which said, which was basically playing on the no jab no pay sort of thing, and the idea there is so that the sign that we saw was saying no jab no way. They're talking about, which is a play on the current government policy, which is no jab, no play, which is basically that if you don't get no jab, no pay. So if you don't, which is a play itself on the policy of schools of no hat, no play. So that policy is, you can't, if you're at school, you can't go outside unless you're wearing a hat at break time. And then there's been a play on that. So no jab, no pay. Because I don't think they can actually get you to be fired through mandates. I'm not sure, but that's what I've heard. At least is they can't fire you they can't mandate you be fired if you don't get the vax. What they can do is say you can't pay them because you can't be working on site. And if you're not on site, you can't get paid because a lot of these businesses they can't do anything a long distance. Some of them can. So some of them all long distance places. They're still even with the vax mandates, their unvaxxed employees are working from distance. But a lot of them, say your schools, your hospitals. A lot of your essential businesses with like with a lot of the shops, they can't operate long distance. So they have to have people, in the store or at the school or at the hospital. So the stance there has been, they won't fire you, but if you don't get the jab, they can't pay you because you can't come to work because you can't be on premises. That's the current mandate in New South Wales, at least, is you can't go on premises anywhere really without the vaccine. I think, as I said last time, Jerry and I did a live stream Tuesday our time, and we basically broke down the current medical orders for New South Wales for the mandate, and basically the only exception to the vaccine mandate is when you're on where you're going has to be outside of the Greater Sydney area. Where you live has to be outside of the Greater Sydney area. You have to have one jab, and you have to be going there for work. So that's the only exception to the vaccine mandate. So that's across that's not every business, but it's across all the essential businesses. You have that vaccine, and plus other ones, you have that vaccine mandate. So, your weddings, funerals, hospitals, schools, all that stuff, you've got vaccine mandates. Essential shops, except for the most essential ones. So your grocery stores are probably are exempt from that because you can't say to people you can't eat if you don't get the vaccine. That's what they're saying. So you can go there without the vaccine, but apart from that, it's really, really hard to go anywhere. Places to worship, there's another one, so you can't go in any of those places without the vaccine. So that's the concern right now. Is it's basically going to create a caste system almost, and then so basically, if you have the vaccine, you get all these freedoms. If you don't, you're screwed. I think there's actually a concert coming up. I think Billie Eilish is doing a New Zealand and Australia music tour. From what I've heard, which is interesting because that's going to be only for the vaxxed. So a bit like what we've seen in New York and the Cuomo, where you had all the clubs you could only get and all the concerts you could only get them if you had a vaccine. Then you've got the Melbourne is when they're having the Melbourne Cup on November the 2nd, and it's 10,000 people with the vaccine who live within 25 kilometres of the racetrack. So you do have all these events that are only for the vaccinated, and so it's a way to try and kind of pressure people into getting the vaccine. If you want to go enjoy these freedoms and enjoy all these events, you have to get the vaccine. I think the last one we've got is So that's more of a regional one, from what I can tell. So it is good to see that people. So yeah, that's your Adelaide one meeting in Rundle Park, and then there was then a march, which I showed photos of before. You had people marching around the streets in Adelaide, and that one, from what I've heard, has had a bit more traction, from outside of the city. Melbourne was a bit hard, from what I've heard. With Melbourne, there was traffic jams because people are going about their days they usually would. But when you look at, say, Adelaide and Brisbane and Western Australia and in Perth, you do have people coming together from more outlying areas. People for the Brisbane one, people coming up from the south down at the Gold Coast, which is almost on the border with New South Wales. So you did have some people literally being bussed into the protests. Adelaide did the same sort of thing, and obviously, as we're saying with the Perth protests, you had people coming in from York as well. So for those three protests, you had more variety of people. People could come from other areas. With Sydney and Melbourne, it's been a bit harder because of the lockdown laws. So I've got another question here: is what is the Aussie media saying about the protests? And from what we've seen from the media, it's been very anti-protest. It depends who you talk to. So the exception is Sky News, which is our version of Fox, I guess you could say. They've been a bit more anti-lockdown. It depends which host you talk to, though, because every host will have their own different perspective and opinion, and the guests will all have different opinions. So it depends who you talk to. They have, however, been a bit more praising of Perrottet, who is the new Premier of New South Wales. Originally, they told us that he's going to be more anti-lockdown. Then he didn't edit the roadmap that Gladys Berejiklian, the previous Premier, was using. So that was basically the exact same roadmap to freedoms, is what they call it, which is basically, step-by-step plan for how we're going to get freedoms back for people. As they get freedoms back, they shouldn't be taken away in the first place. It's not the government to take away. But so that's been the stance from Sky. Is generally very critical of Mark McGowan, Palaszczuk, and Dan Andrews, in particular, because that's Labor, whereas Sky is more conservative. But they were also critical of Gladys Berejiklian from New South Wales to an extent. Perrottet, they're going a bit less harsh on. So it depends who the Premier is. Scott Morrison, they've criticised. So they have been a bit more critical of all of Australia. The ABC, for example, until recently, did not criticise Dan Andrews. You may have heard me talking about Lee Sales in the past. She was an ABC reporter who criticised Dan Andrews once and is now labelled conservative, which is interesting because the ABC is taxpayer funded. So you're not going to have conservatives being taxpayer funded because, in theory, conservatives are going to be less. They're not going to want that funding for the media. Whereas, and we have seen that the Liberal Party will often, in their budgets, give ABC less funding than Labor will. So ABC tends to be more pro Labor, A, because it's taxpayer funded, and B, because if people are going to get money from somewhere, we know that they'll be more pro that group. So obviously you've got, for example, you could compare it to lobbying groups, I guess. Is if Labor's going to pay the ABC more money, then ABC is of course going to be more friendly to Labor, because if they can help Labor, get back in and be friendly to Labor, they're going to get even more money. So it's like anyone else, they're just trying to get money. So they're a bit more left wing. Then you've got your middle of the road ones. So 7 and 9 are probably the two biggest ones. To a lesser extent, 10. Channel 10, so they're all numbered. So 7 and 9 are your two main ones, and 10 is a bit smaller. And that depends on which station you listen to, because they've got statewide and local stations. So where I am in Toowoomba, the local media has been critical of Palaszczuk to an extent. Not massively. And the only reason why they've been critical of her at all is because we're more of a conservative town. But by and large, the media has not been too critical of lockdowns. Of course, that's where there are exceptions, but mostly it's been pretty much supportive of the lockdowns. And in particular, whenever protests happen, most media outlets will immediately complain about protesters being violent and label them violent. Even newspapers that have been critical of Dan Andrews will call protesters violent. And obviously, there's that big story recently from the New York Times, and I might pull that one up actually. New York Times, they recently did an article on Australia and the protests here, It was an opinion article, I'm pretty sure. And basically, the idea of it was, Australia is not actually. It was written by actually a self-professed Marxist, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm sure she went on Q&A, which is an Australian program by the ABC, and basically said that she's a self-professed Marxist Christian, and she wrote for the New York Times, basically saying that Australia is still a free country, and no, we're not a COVID dictatorship, which I think is pretty surprising considering what we've seen from looking at all the protests and the like. It has not seemed to me to be very much pro-freedom. So I'll just pull that one up quickly. So yes, that's the piece by the New York Times right there. So Van Badham is an Australian. So titled "No, Australia is not actually an evil dictatorship," and you look at this. So that's obviously this is from Melbourne. So in the background there, you've got a picture of the War Memorial or Remembrance Shrine in Melbourne. I think it's Melbourne. So you've got all the protesters here, and of course they've picked this one just because you've got people with their arms outstretched. I guess the idea there is, I guess linking the fascism because some of them have one arm outstretched, and so of course we're going to take that and we're going to say they're fascist. Of course, the reason why she's taken that stance is because she's writing a book right now on QAnon and writes about far right disinformation campaigns. So obviously, very much considering she's also a Marxist, very, very much everything to the right of her is far right, which is very interesting because as we were saying before, you've got people who just you tradies, working class, you've got Aboriginals, you've got middle class, you've got basically everyone from every walk of life protesting. So unless you're going to label all of them far right, it does, where do you draw the line there? Who's far right and who actually isn't far right? Because most of the protesters aren't actually far right. I like this comment. She sounds like a complete twat. Basically, you're correct. I personally don't like it because, as we did a live stream a few weeks ago when we talked about Christianity and liberty, and of course from that video, of course we were talking about Christianity and why it's more pro-liberty. So I'm not a fan of her stances on Christianity from a Marxist standpoint, but also the fact that she is Marxist just in general. She's also anti Orwell as well. Very critical of him. Doesn't like George Orwell at all. She's often criticised DeSantis as well. I think, in fact, in that article, she says that DeSantis is completely wrong about Australia because Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, has been critical of the Australian government. And with regards to lockdowns, and she's criticised him. I know people in America often compare DeSantis to Trump. At least people on the left will do that. So we do still have those ongoing comparisons. People have previously called our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, they've called him Australia's version of Donald Trump. Basically the left still doing the same thing as comparing everyone to Nazis, and everyone on the right is Nazis or MAGA or pro-Trump or anything like that. Just general labels that have basically lost all meaning these days. So I've got another question here. So the protests in all states and territories? Are there multiple in some states? No. So you've got, from what I've seen, you have Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, Perth. So that leaves Canberra, Darwin, and Hobart. I think there's some protests in Canberra. I'm not sure though, and I haven't heard anything about Hobart and Darwin. Hobart being the capital of Tasmania and Darwin being the capital of the Northern Territory. I have not heard anything about protests in those two cities. One final question from the group, from the chats here, is what I've lost it. How many protests are going on across the country right now? So yeah, it's just those 5. The ones in Sydney and Melbourne have already probably wrapped up, because it's going to be like 4:30 there, 4:30 p.m. over there. So they've been going for 4.5 hours ago. They started at midday their time. So they probably wrapped up. I reckon the Brisbane one's probably looking at wrapping up, whereas over in Perth it's only like 1:30. So they're still going strong. So they've just moved to doing their march a few minutes ago. So they probably spent about over an hour doing speeches and whatnot, and then now they've moved into doing their march. So I expect that to go on for a while still. So because we have staggered time zones like that, we do still have some protests going on. They're not going to finish for a couple of hours, probably. I wouldn't say in Western Australia. Like you got probably like an hour and a half or so also to go. It depends on how the protest goes. Of course, I'm not over there. So we've got Centrist. He'll give us updates on the protests over there. But it does look like we are seeing a much more peaceful, non-violent protest. And so I've always been a fan of, and as I've said on here, I've been a fan of non-violence, non-violent, peaceful protesting. Why I'm support that is, well, you look at, say, Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., for example, with their non-violent protests, that they were successful, as opposed to, your more violent Indian separationists or separatists or whatever. I can't remember their actual name, but we had Indian separatists who weren't successful. You had more violent African American groups in America who weren't successful. Non-violence is the non-violent movement survived and worked in those two countries. It survived for so long, and then it was effectively getting changed. So you do non-violence, you change people's hearts and minds, you show that you aren't actually the extremists, and you win the cultural battle. The cultural battle is the first step to go. Especially in Australia, where we don't have gun rights to the same extent to say that we're doing it as much as Americans do. We do still have guns, but most people don't own guns. Very few people do. It's mostly farmers and recreational shooters that own guns, and those shooters have to be members of firearm clubs to be able to get the license to use firearms. I'm pretty sure. So there aren't many guns, so we don't have the ability to rise up and have rebellion in the same way that you could in, say, America if that went south. But yeah, violence would basically mean that if we go violent, then we've lost the war, because we'd have the military and the police, and we wouldn't have the people on our side because we'd be violent. The way to go is peaceful. I know a lot of people overseas have called for violent protests in Australia. You guys need to get ready to use your guns. You need to start 3D printing firearms and be prepared. I refuse to call for violence, and I have condemned the violent protesters because they're doing more harm than good. If you're out there, you're protesting, and you're being violent, you are going to hurt your own cause. You might get some support from overseas, but you're going to hurt your own cause domestically. And what we need right now is to worry about is the domestic front, and getting people in Australia to be critical of the government and be supportive of the liberty movement, which is why it's good to see people in Perth from all walks of life coming together, because it shows that we are having success. We are winning the cultural war to an extent. It's a long way to go. It'll get worse before it gets better, but we are making progress. It's a big white pill to see just the diversity we've seen from the Perth protests today. So I guess that's where we stand right now for COVID measures before. So we're coming up now on, what's today, the 16th. We're looking at New South Wales should be getting there. They should be hitting the 80% towards the end of this month, I'm pretty sure. So then we're going to see more reopening in New South Wales. In Victoria, it's going to be the 2nd of November, which will be the trial run, which is the Melbourne Cup. But it could be even before then. We don't know. We have heard there has been rumours the last couple of days. There have been rumours of reopening before then. But as I said, that's not going to be popular with even from the left, really, because they're reopening before it's safe to do so. You see the support. So when I shared that graphic before from Queensland, there was lots of support from the left for the Premier and for the Premier's policy on that, with regards to we're not opening up until it's safe to do so. So I'd imagine it's a similar culture in Victoria. You're going to have that similar culture from the left of only when it's safe to do so. So by Dan Angel opening up now, it's probably going to do more harm than good. So that's just my opinion on that right now. But I don't see I don't think we're going to see success for a while. It is going to take months. What I've been saying to people is, I reckon election. We have the federal election next year, which will be March, April, May. I think March, April actually. Will be the federal election for Australia next year, and I think that's where you're going to see the impact of the protests. So for the last 5-6 years, whenever we've seen elections and votes, with the exception of America's election last year, they have all said that the left will win. Same with the elections in the state level elections we've seen in Queensland have been pretty much accurately predicted. But at more of a federal level, you've got Brexit, which was meant to be the left would win that, and with their Remain vote, and Leave won. 2016, Trump won, not Hillary. 2019, Scott Morrison won, not Labor's Bill Shorten, who then stepped down and was replaced by Anthony Albanese, who's the current leader of the opposition party in Australia. So in those elections, you saw the right winning when the left was meant to from polling. Also, you had the recent UK election as well, which Boris Johnson won, even though it's meant to be the left. So from polling, it'll generally go towards the left, because what we've seen so far is the right will be a bit more uneasy and unwilling to, speak their mind about who they're actually going to vote for. So polling tends to be a bit more to the left and not 100% accurate. So it's going to be hard to use polling as we stand right now to determine the mindset of people towards the protests, especially with the violent protests. But if the protests and stuff remain peaceful until March, April next year, I reckon we're going to see a big swing towards more liberty-minded parties. So you've got One Nation, Clive Palmer's UAP, and the Lib Dems, as well as some other minor parties like Australia One, which we saw a few signs of before. So that does give us some hope, is we can use the election to get accurate data. The problem, of course, there is being an anarchist. I don't like relying on elections because we know how unreliable elections are for freedom. It's very, very rare that you can actually vote your way to freedom. I hate to use that, but that's a cliche. But it does seem to be true that you can't vote your way to freedom completely, because the government is inherently statist, because it's a government. So I don't like relying on elections, but unfortunately we have to rely on elections to give us a picture of the people's mindset in Australia, because we don't have any hardcore libertarian party. So the Lib Dems are classical liberals, so they're on the political compass, they'd be more statist than the US LP, so which is be more classical liberal / minarchist, depending on the caucus. We don't have caucuses in Australia. The Lib Dems are more united, but they're more classical liberal, so it's a bit more watered down. So they are going to get you part of the web, not going to get you the full way, all of the way. But the problem there as well, we have right now in Australia, is we don't have that culture of liberty, which is what we're trying to push for here at ALN. We're trying to push for that culture of liberty in Australia. So just some brief history, I guess. The Lib Dems have only been around for 20 odd years. We've had success in Victoria. 2018, we got two state MPs in the Senate. And we got the same thing in Western Australia. We had one state senator from Western Australia who was Lib Dem, who lost this year's election in WA, and then also David Leyonhjelm, who was elected in 2013 in the federal election. He was the federal senator from New South Wales, and then he stepped down in 2019 before the election. Then he resigned from office, which I guess is good, because we don't want career politicians, but ideas of liberty are a lot more, I guess, restricted in Australia than they are in America. We don't have that Bill of Rights with our freedoms in it, so people don't know their rights. A lot of our rights rest in common law. We get that from the UK, where they had the UK, all their rights come from common law, and we copied the same basic idea because we were a colony of them. So our rights are also common law, not statutory. And then they have been eroded over time. As early as 1908, you had the court saying that freedom of movement is not actually limited. It's only when the law says you can. You have freedom of movement except when the law says you can't, was the stance taken there by the High Court of Australia in 1908, which is 7 years. The Federation was 1901, so that's 7 years. So that is, so we don't have that. We don't have freedom. People can, people like a lot of Americans can often, they'll often know the first few amendments. The main 10 in particular, especially 1 and 2. Most people in America, know their rights. At least from what I've seen, we don't have that in Australia. So we don't have that same mindset here. We've got our independence by voting, And then we haven't had any civil war. We haven't had a threat to our national security. The closest we came is World War II with Japan. But even then, when it came to World War II with Japan, Japan never intended to attack Australia because they couldn't, because they were already fighting in the Pacific, plus all the islands in Southeast Asia, so Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, plus India, plus China. They didn't have the manpower to attack Australia, so there was actually there was no actual threat there. There was propaganda from the government to say that would be a threat, but that's because the government and propaganda, like a married couple, you can't have one without the other. You have to have them together. The government basically runs on propaganda. If they didn't have propaganda, they'd be screwed, because that's how they win into people's minds and can pass laws and have their tyranny without people complaining about it. So unfortunately, without that mindset of liberty, and without any real libertarian party until 2001, it is an uphill battle, even more so than it is in, say, America. But hopefully, the next few months are going to see a swing towards liberty, provided that these protests remain non-violent. If they do go violent, it'll go downhill south for us, basically. And also, if they send in the military as well, that'll also be to our advantage, because the military being used against Australians is going to ring some alarm bells. So the left will probably love it, because they always try and twist stuff to be positive towards them. So now they're supporting the police, whereas last year when you had the BLM protests, they were anti-police. But people on the right in particular, as soon as the military is brought in, are going to become more anti-lockdown, which is what I think we need to see. So either the military, or COVID restrictions getting worse will swing some people towards the liberty movement, and that's how we win. We win the cultural war. It's going to be a long battle, but I do think it's possible to win it. So I'm not white pilled by any extent, but I'm not really white pilled. I'm also not really black pilled either, because it's more of a grey pill. Because although it looks bleak, and it might not get better, but it can get better. So just because I say it might not get better, doesn't mean it won't. So it still is possible to go either way. It's on a knife edge right now, I guess. Yeah, it depends. If the protesters go violent, people support the state. If the state goes more violent, people are going to start supporting the protesters. So it's really on a knife edge right now. And these protests not going violent does show that potentially we are seeing some success, which is good to see. But then, of course, you also have things like the Melbourne vote, the Victorian vote in the Parliament there, which basically means that four members of the upper house can't vote. So that's bad for our cause. So it does depend state to state, unfortunately, as to where you're going to see liberty rise up. So I guess that's really how things sit for us right now. Hoping that Centrist will get back to us soon with more reports from on the ground. But that's general summary of how we see it right now. Any other questions I should get to before he comes back? I'm just going to quickly check Twitter, see if we've got any more updates from the protests. I know there were a few people live streaming the protests. I just want to see if they've got any more news for us. Because as I said before, we've got a network of around 50 Aussies all across Australia, so they're feeding us information and tweets as we go. So whenever we have protests, people are always sending us tweets that we can talk about, which is, I think, useful as a way to get information, because we can't get it from the media. We have to rely on people who are on the ground, which is what we're doing with Centrist right now, getting people who are on the ground, giving us news from on the ground, which I think is really beneficial to us. I've just seen one tweet from Twitter, from the protest, in fact, where someone was at the protest, lost their job, met someone else at the protest who was an employer, and so now this. So actually, I'll share it now from on the stream, and I'll read it out for the people who are listening to the audio version. In when we put that up after we finished with the recording, with the live stream. So I'll bring that up now on the screen. So just at the pleasure of meeting and will now hire a young tradie or tradesman who is standing firm, currently unemployed due to his choice to not be jabbed to earn a living. Very proud. So stuff like this is what I like to see. Stuff like this is really good for our cause. And I guess that's very refreshing to see people like that, because of course it depends where you are, but in places like New South Wales and Melbourne, that would probably be, you'd get in trouble with the law for doing that. So I am fortunate to be in Queensland where that is possible. Same in Western Australia, it's also possible there, although not as much. But New South Wales and Victoria is where it's really bad right now when you look at stuff like that, and that's where you're seeing all the stories come out from. I also heard stories this morning saying there were traffic jams in Victoria, particularly in Melbourne, from protesters, trying to get to the protests, plus all the normal traffic, even though the stay-at-home orders, people trying to get out of the house and really do stuff, because they have been stuck in the houses for months. So we are seeing some people try and get back to normal. They're not protesting; they're just trying to live their lives as they normally would, which I think is good to see, because it's not violence again. It's all peaceful. People are getting fed up with the protest, with the lockdowns, and which have been in place for so long. I think 250 something days for Melbourne. That's since COVID started, 250 days in lockdown. So at least looking at 9 months or something, like 8-9 months in total over the last 20 months. So almost half of COVID has been spent in lockdown. So you do have a lot of anger there. Of course, they are blaming Scott Morrison for it. Victorian Labor Party has blamed Scott Morrison, said it's his fault. So even though it's been even a Dan Andrews as a state politician, as a state premier, it's his choice. It is apparently Scott Morrison's fault that Dan Andrews had to choose for that more tyrannical response, I guess. So yeah, it's a lot of blame shifting. I guess blame shifting is often how the government operates. Hey, they're always going to try and blame anyone but themselves because they don't like hitting that flack. What else do we have to cover? Okay, I've someone sent me footage of the protests down in Brisbane today, so I think I'll pull those up for you guys. So this is footage from the protests down in Brisbane. So this is where Jerry was. So Jerry was down there with those protesters down on the ground there. I'm happy to get information back from her later on and to cover in a later podcast about how the protests went down there today. So I'll bring that up and quickly play that for you guys. So this is again people taking. You can see people on their phones already, like all along the sides, taking video of the protests. So obviously much bigger than the Perth protests, because it's a much bigger city, and they've got people being bussed in from all around the surrounding area. So they were there chanting "My body, my choice." We saw the red on sign which is the upside down red on sign. So you're seeing a lot of protests all across Australia, which I think is really refreshing to see all these protests. So I'll pull a few more up for you guys and play those as well. Apologies to the audio only listeners. This is very much a video focus. This live stream. But unfortunately, you don't need graphics to talk about the protests. So I'll just bring this one up. So again, just some more photos from the protests today. Here's one sign that I like. Nothing says slave, like a passport to go about everyday life. Another sign there on the side, you can kind of see it. It's got the map of Australia on it. It says, "End the lockdowns. no, we're not okay. So it's it's basically talking about Are You Okay Day is the message behind that one, saying that, as I was saying before, the mental health issues that we have from the protests, or sorry, that we have from the lockdowns, are ridiculous. Like 148 people being admitted every day for suicide, attempts on suicides and self harm in Victoria. Suicide hasn't skyrocketed, but suicide attempts and self harm have, because people are at home with their family. It's a bit harder for them because they're always going to be like with their family. They can't. This is mostly teenagers, so it's going to be harder for them to say no, commit suicide, but because their parents are going to be there monitoring them. But we do have high rates of self harm and suicide, and self harm and attempted suicide, which is really, really worrying. So although this will give many people who come out of the lockdowns will have built up a lot of resilience and perseverance, for many others they'll be dealing with mental health issues for a long time to come. Of course, that's often overlooked. People will often prefer to focus on the mental, on the economic side of things, and people will to focus on people often prefer talking about economics and politics than talking about the mental health side of things, which is something that's always mental health is something that's always overlooked. Especially right now, there's not a big focus on mental health. Because people, basically kids are stuck at home in Melbourne for 8-9 months doing schooling from home, just sitting in front of the computer all day doing schooling from home without being able to get out and socialize at all. So they're basically stuck. Say for example, so that's going to be fine, if you've got both your parents at home and you've got siblings. But okay, let's imagine different scenarios where you've got like a single kid. So he's going to be stuck at home for months without seeing anyone else his age. You can imagine how it's going to affect him mentally or her mentally. Or you've got a single parent with multiple kids. It's going to be a lot more of a stress load on that single parent than it would be to have two parents. And then of course you've got the stress on that one parent, which then means that there's going to be flow-on effects to their kids. And a lot of Melbourneans do live in apartment complexes as opposed to living in suburban houses. So the kind of thing, get a breath of fresh air. In fact, we saw in Sydney, there was that one story where the guy, left his house to get a breath of fresh air in his car. The police who were doing the raids went and did door knocking raids. They went and knocked on his house door. He wasn't there. They waited outside his house for him to come home, then find him for getting a breath of fresh air. Which I think is ridiculous. Like, you're seeing all these fines for really small things. As I said before, there's also that one story as well of what was it? Kids were playing basketball, and someone asked the police to fine them for playing basketball outside. I think that was Sydney. They were playing basketball outside. Someone was asking the police to fine them. To fine the parents $1,000 each because the kids were outside playing basketball. And I guess that reflects the mindset of a lot of Australians. As I said, we don't have that culture of liberty, so people are, much more willing to report their neighbour to the police and whatnot because it's a duty. People in Australia are a lot more driven by a sense of duty than they are by a sense of rights. So for those who don't know, voting in Australia is not voluntary; it's mandatory. So anyone over the age of 18 until you die has to vote. If you don't vote, you get fined. So what that means, of course, is that voting is not a right, it's a duty. Because a right implies a right to not do something. So if you have the right to bear arms, you also have the right to not bear arms. If you have the right to abortion, you have the right to not have an abortion. But we don't have the right to vote because we don't have the right to not vote, if you get what I mean. So it's a civil duty, not a right. Which is unfortunate because it does mean that you're going to have people who are apathetic, who don't care. So they vote for they know Liberals and they know Labor, so they'll vote for those two parties every time. They just vote them back into office because that's all they know. All they know is those two parties. So my parents don't like this party, therefore I don't like them either. People just don't care. So when we had the same-sex marriage plebiscite 2017, you had your voting. So that was voluntary. Voting turnouts was 70, high 70%, like 70, 80%, high 70s, low 80s. For what I have seen, so you had that turnout for an important issue, same-sex marriage, that was voluntary. You had massive get out the vote campaigns for that one, and then you compare it to the 95% turnout for the election because it's mandatory voting. So you're looking at 10-20% of people who are apathetic and don't care about most issues. So you're looking up to a fifth of the population who doesn't care, which I think is really worrying for elections. It means the government has basically got guaranteed votes. There's guaranteed votes for both Labor and Liberals. Yes, so someone in the chat has said that their first vote was officially to neither Labor nor Liberal, and I think it's a good stance to take. I always say vote the major parties last, so vote Liberal, Labor, Greens last. So what I said people to do is either donkey vote, which is it's where you mess up the ballot paper, so it's not counted. So either donkey vote for Lib Dems because they're libertarian. So if you vote for Lib Dems, what that means is they'll get more votes, they'll get more share of the votes, they get more media coverage. The people listen to the media coverage, go see what the party stands for, and you could win some converts to libertarianism through that. People, finding out what that party stands for. And the third one is if the politician in your local area is, more liberty-minded. So that's going to be rare, but we have, say, as I said before, you had Neil Angus, Liberal. He's a member of the Liberal Party for the lower house in Victoria, and he voted against the bill to require politicians to hand over their vaccination information. So, for example, if you're in his electorate, probably voting for him is probably not a bad thing because he's more liberty-minded. So either donkey vote. I'm not going to say don't vote because I'm not going to encourage anyone to commit a crime. So either donkey vote Lib Dems, or vote for someone else who's liberty-minded. So that's the three things you want to do. Where you can, you want to put the two major parties, Labor and Liberal, as well as Greens, who are the biggest minor party. You want to put them last. So Greens are to the left of Labor. They have, because we have the Senate where you have multiple per state with proportionate voting and ranked voting. There is one Greens MP in the lower house federally, but 9 in the Senate. So they often work with Labor to pass bills in the Senate. They created a coalition under Julia Gillard, which is early 2010s, in the lower house, because she didn't get a majority for that in that election. So that's how that works. So they didn't get enough votes for that election for Labor. So they had what's called a minority government. So then they had to work with Labor to pass bills. So Labor had to work with Greens to pass bills in both houses. I just heard from Centrist that he has basically his phone battery, so he's not going to be able to get back to us on the protests. So we're not going to see anything more from the marching. So I think unless there's any other questions in the chat, I think I'll finish up the stream here. We've been going for about 2 hours. So this will be one of the longer shows. This will go up on YouTube. It'll be up immediately because it's a live stream, and it'll go out on audio probably tomorrow night. So make sure to share this with all your friends, especially the first hour and a half, so they get video footage of what it's like to be on the ground in the protests. Apart from that, thanks everyone for tuning in.